So a quick introduction to SAMPS for those of you joining us that maybe haven't joined us in one of our webinar series before. SAMPS is a not-for-profit. It stands for Sales and Marketing Professionals in Science. And we are all about, helping people in their careers, in their scientific sales and marketing careers. And we do webinars like these, obviously. Our next one is on podcasting in November, so keep a wee eye on the website for that. And we run many events as well. So the big upcoming event is our SAMPS Awards. It's in its third year this year. And the nominations are still open. They close next Friday. And that's for everything sales and marketing. And there's 12 different categories. So it's a great way to nominate yourself if you're feeling confident, or nominate your colleagues. And it's a lovely and nice bit of PR. It's free to enter as well. And our other big event coming up is our Boston annual US meetup. That's on the 5th and 6th of December. And that this year is all about AI. So we had run a European version in Glasgow, which was a huge success. So we're going to repeat this in Boston. So if you're interested in finding out about ChatGPT, Midjourney, and just AI generally in your sales and marketing for scientists, then definitely check that out as well. It's all on the website. And if you're not already a member, free to join. Just pop on our website, put in your details, and then you'll get all of this information sent to you as well. So today I'm joined by Sharon. So Sharon is the MD of BioChannel Partners. So she knows all about finding and looking after distributors. So thank you so much, Sharon, for joining us today. We also have Rory Geoghegan. We have a very European based panel today and a very Irish based panel. But that is probably an obvious thing that happens, as it does tend to happen that distributors are predominantly used throughout Europe and Asia mostly. So it makes sense that we are very much European based today. So Rory is the director of RedBox Direct, who are a pseudo distributor. Rory, would you call yourselves distributors?
We are somewhat a stepping stone between being a distributor and setting up your own local office. We do that for companies in Europe and in Southeast Asia.
Perfect. And then we have Judith Key. So she is Channel Partner Executive at Oxford Instruments, or an Oxford Instruments company. And she looks after their channel partners then in Europe and Middle East, Judy?
Middle East and India, yeah.
Brilliant. So anyone that has any questions, feel free to pop them in here. I'm only here to look at the questions and help the guys make sure that we get all of your questions answered today. So, I mean, the first question that everyone is probably wondering is, where do you have that debate of when you sell direct or when you use a distributor? What is that sort of pros and cons that you should look into when you're making that decision? And Sharon, we can kick off with you for your insights.
I think you need to look at the number of potential end customers that you've got. If they're small and easily definable and easily reachable, then it's better to go direct, unless it's a country where you need to go through a distributor. But if you've got potential customers in lots and lots of different locations and lots of different types of labs, it's unlikely that you're going to be able to have the field sales staff to be able to service all of your customers adequately. So it's about coverage, and channel partners, distributors are the best way to hit the ground running. And in our industry, it's important to get to the market fast, because there's always somebody coming up after your heels. So channel partners are a really good way of getting into a market fast.
And Rory, do you find that there's particular countries that that's more applicable for, or is it just general across the world?
I think it's general. I think the people who work best selling from home are companies that have from home base, very high value and low volume products. And they're few and far between, but there are some. I've seen some very specialized microscopy products that are hugely expensive and might only have a handful of prospective users, even in Europe, and therefore it makes sense to sell them direct from your home base, whether that be Japan or America. But other than that, I think it's the same. I think a bigger decision people have to make, particularly in Europe, is whether to go for a lot of small distributors or one or two big distributors and either target the whole of Europe or split Europe into one or two sections. Europe is sort of a tricky beast in that regard, I think.
Yeah, Judy, what have you found in terms of working with having one point of contact with one big distributor or splitting that up? And obviously that's more to manage.
Yeah. Well, we have found, and certainly with my experience, I've found it's actually better nearly to go with a smaller distributor in the specific country from a language point of view. And what we find often in some of these smaller countries as well, if there's a tender, then it has to be a local company who participates in the tender. So actually in some places you sort of have to find a distributor or a channel to do the business for you. So that's what I would find in Europe. We tend to have, certainly within Andor, we tend to have a distributor for a specific country, and that seems to work very well.
Which countries is
I would
it
also
that
say about,
mostly you have? Sorry, go on ahead.
sorry, I would
I was
also
going to ask
say,
which countries it was that. I think there's a delay.
I sort of find that countries that we have distributors in, well, to be honest, it's most of the countries in Europe, but certainly within, we would tend to look at the funding that's going to come in, so if we want to appoint a distributor, we might look at the funding that's going to come into that specific country for their research. So we'd have a look at that and see if it's actually worthwhile. Do we have a direct presence there, or do we think about a distributor? So that can be one of the reasons why we either go direct or distributor. Distributors in even small countries are useful. Again, it can be from the point of view of the end user would contact us about a specific product, but we know that they can't buy directly. They have to go through a local company. So therefore we need to then bring on board a distributor or a channel.
Perfect. And then finding them, I guess, Sharon, that's your sweet spot, because it can be overwhelming to work out who is the best one, and you can't exactly go to your competitors and ask them who they use.
You can't go to your competitors, but I would have a look at who your competitors are using, because sometimes your competitors have got several distributors in one country, and so it's always worth having a chat with the distributors. If they're really happy with their current supplier, then that's fine, you can leave it alone. But it might be that that they're on their way out and they need a new supplier, or and the thing is, if you've got somebody who's already familiar with those kind of products, then they should have customers there already. But I wouldn't, a lot of distributors as well, when a company takes over another company, then then you end up with multiple distributors, and they know that they're going to have to go at some point. So it's worth contacting them and asking them if they're happy and if they're looking for an alternative. Sometimes if they've been a distributor for a company and they're not doing very much for other reasons, it could be that they don't want to take the manufacturer off their website, but they're not actually doing anything for them. So you don't know if there's a strong relationship there or not. So it's worth asking. But yeah, check the not only competitors, but I would have a look at your customers. Think from your customers and what are they using in the lab that they would be using at the same time as your product. Maybe what they're doing upstream, what they're doing downstream, and put together a list of those products around about the same price range, technical complexity, that kind of stuff. Put together a list of those kinds of products, because you want distributors that are going to visit your customers who have got complementary products in their portfolio, because they're going to be visiting those customers more regularly. So then put together a list of those products, and then using in that country, and that will give you a nice big list. It is tempting to go to a trade show and set up a booth and have distributors walking past and introducing themselves to you, and I haven't got a distributor in that country, I'll sign those guys up. But I reckon it's better to know who's around, who's available, qualify them, and then make the choice from that broader list rather than the hit or miss sort of meeting people at trade shows as well. You can also ask other channel partner managers that you know in the industry who would they recommend, but rather than just going with that, put them into your pool of potential partners that you would evaluate in a very methodical way. And when I say that, I mean put together a profile of what your ideal channel partner looks like and have a checklist of the things that are absolutely critical, the things that are nice to have, and make sure that you evaluate the candidate channel partners against those criteria. And then you'll know the best one for you is less likely to fall through the cracks.
So the criteria typically would be things like, you know, have they the technical ability to provide after sales support? You know, do they have the other languages, that sort of thing?
Yeah, and have a look at their current product portfolio. How many companies do they have in there? And have a look at the number of salespeople that they've got and the geographical area. And you can get a feeling about, well, how can they do all that with 5 salespeople? You know, to have all of those products, they'd need to have a lot more. So it's not an exact science, but you can have a look at the companies and the companies that they represent and the number of salespeople that they've got and see if it's lined up. You can dig a wee bit deeper and ask them, you know, which products do you really focus on? Because there's going to be lots of other, you know, companies in there that they maybe don't focus on so much, but it's dig a wee bit deeper. So have a look at their website, who are they representing, but you need to know a bit more about the people who work in the company, how you know their technical support team, as you say, their logistics, the management. Have a look at the management of the company and how long have they been running the company. Also have a look at the salespeople. Have they been with the company for a long time, or did they get a whole set of salespeople sort of every other year? How qualified are they? Do they fit the qualifications that your product needs to be able to demonstrate and sell in a technical kind of way? So there's a lot of digging to be done to make sure that you get the right one, and it's important to do that, I think, rather than just jumping in without evaluating the alternatives.
It is an interesting one that when companies are acquired, they end up with multiple distributors. I hadn't thought of that. Rory, like what's your opinion on exclusivity? Should you have one per country, or is there a capacity to have multi in some situations?
I think, and I think Sharon has touched on this very well, the problem is it isn't simple. It depends a lot on the product you have. So there's a whole load of choices people need to make. For example, you know, people always talk about exclusivity, but if you look at the other end, there are products where it may make sense to find a distributor who is selling other competing products simply because they have the presence in the right labs. Take catalogs, who are effectively distributors. It makes sense for a lot of people to be in one or two of the big catalogs that are sold all across, you know, that sell products across Europe and America. And, you know, if you're selling incubators, which whilst they're not cheap, are relatively commoditized, there's a number of different brands in each of these big master distributors. So it really is product dependent. Exclusivity, I think normally for a higher value, more specialized product, that's ideal. I think what's super ideal and the nirvana of distributors is if you can find a distributor who sells some other products to the same customers that are complementary. For example, say you have a product that works on a tissue and there's in a particular area of research, and there are other companies sell products for the whole animal or for cellular level stuff. And you find a distributor that's got 2 of those pieces, but not the tissue piece. You know, their salespeople are going to be walking into the same lab, seeing the correct professors, offering all 3 products, of course, but there's no downside for you. And it's efficient for the distributor as well. They love that because what you're really saying is for them, it can be a lot more efficient. We did that successfully in 1 or 2 distributors. We have another company in Massachusetts in our group, a manufacturing company. And we had a little bit of luck in 1 or 2 areas, and they've been our most successful distributors, where we've found people who have other complementary products. But normally, for most specialized products, exclusivity is preferred, I think. Yeah.
Can
It
I
is
say
worth
something
saying.
about
Go ahead,
yeah,
Sharon.
about exclusivity? It's just an observation, but I've noticed that the bigger companies in the industry absolutely won't go exclusive. They're saying no way, we're going to go exclusive. But I've noticed that creeping down into the medium-sized, and then the smaller manufacturers won't use exclusive distributors. And I think that in Europe in particular, the antitrust law keeps creeping up as a potential issue, because it's they're worried that, now I'm no lawyer, but I think that there is a concern that you can't tell your distributor not to sell a competitor product, because you're telling them, you're directing them to not make business. And I think it's a bit of a gray area, but I think the bigger companies have cottoned on to that antitrust law and might be a bit afraid of getting bitten by it. I don't think anybody has yet, but it's using the word exclusivity is, I think, maybe a wee bit, it might get you into trouble eventually. A lot of people I've noticed are starting to use the term sole distributor or preferred distributor, or premium distributor or whatever. So they're not using the word exclusive anymore. I've just noticed that it's being used less and less frequently over the years as I'm talking to manufacturers and distributors. A lot of people still use the term, but I think I would be careful about using that in a contract with a distributor.
Okay, very interesting. And one of the questions
Could
as
I-
well, Judy, here is whether, and to everyone, is whether you can have a direct presence as well as a distributor, or if that's a recipe for disaster.
I think
Yeah. Sorry, sorry.
Go on ahead,
From
Judy.
my point of view, yeah, from my point of view, in general, we wouldn't have that. But again, it depends. Sometimes we have different types of products, and therefore we might have a distributor selling one type of product and then a direct presence selling another type of product. But certainly, in our experience, we wouldn't have both together for the same product, because it just wouldn't work. What I would say is, from the exclusivity point of view, we wouldn't give exclusive really first off. We might have a period, like a 6-12 months period, where they're not exclusive, but they've got to prove themselves, reaching a target or whatever. And we would also want to be out in the market with them first of all before we'd make them exclusive. So we'd want to go with them, go and visit customers, see how the salespeople are with the customers, see how the customers respond to them as well, before we'd certainly go with them on an exclusive basis. So that's how we would work normally within Andor.
Sorry,
thought
Rory, you had more to add as well.
Well, a thought, Sharon triggered a thought in me, and Judith, I think you're right. This thing of sole distributors, of deciding to only appoint one, is actually much more common now. And I think another reason it occurs is that a lot of manufacturers have been bitten badly with discovering that distributors have gouged their customers. Now, there's a lot of price transparency in Europe and so on, but in China, for example, it's still common for a customer to end up paying 4 to 6 times on a high-value capital equipment. I mean, I saw a case recently with a $150,000 piece of equipment being offered to a customer for $650,000, and even allowing for landing costs and taxes. That was, extreme, but not unusual. So I think sole distributorship gives a manufacturer a way of saying, well, look, you're the sole distributor, but we reserve the right to keep you honest. us directly and says, you've quoted, and we think you quoted something insane, we might decide to exercise our option to quote them directly, or we might point to somebody else as an intermediary, or, you know, so there can be a little bit of that in the mix as well, because particularly in the early days, trust can be a problem, you know, there's contracts and then there's building up trusting relationships, you know.
Yeah, I think that's a really big issue. Trust, I think, is really important, because you can't assume that there's going to be trust from the beginning, particularly with a new distributor. And somebody has to start building that trust. Somebody has to kick that off by doing something that's going to be useful for the other person and asking for something in return to build that trust up. And it could be that they don't trust you, and it might not be something that you've done or your company's done. It could be that the distributor has been bitten by another manufacturer and they don't trust anybody, and they're afraid to share the names of their customers, even though you could probably really help them to get a sale, but they're kind of scared in case you take the sale off them. So I think trust is absolutely critical, and it's not something that you can assume is there. You have to work on it and be mindful about working out whether they trust you or not, and do something to try and build that up. I love that topic.
Trust. So the other thing, and on trust, I mean, the distributor agreement is coming up a lot in the questions here. You know, one particular person is saying that it's taking very, very long to actually set up a distributor agreement, the back and forth. There's, you know, is there any way to speed that up? Is there any things that you guys would definitely say that should be included in that? Or should you, you know, not go so heavy on the paperwork initially because it almost breaks that trust? It's like a prenup.
Having an agreement can be quite motivational if you manage the expectations within the agreement. If they know what you're going to do for them and you do it, and they know what is expected of them, and that's all very clear, that the trust breaks down when there's ambiguity and they don't know what's happening, and something happens and they don't know, what to do about it. So I think it's important to get in the agreement, anticipate what could go wrong or what could go right, and have some kind of a plan in there so that they know what's going to happen under those circumstances. And if something does happen, then you can direct them to the agreement and say, well, we said that if you take on a competitive product, this is going to happen, or whatever. You can have that. Or if our company gets taken over by another company, this is what's going to happen. If another distributor sells into your territory, this is what we're going to do about it. So if you take away, just manage all of those expectations and all these things, you know, if you're a channel partner manager for a while, you'll have come across most of them. So if you get that into the agreement, then it can help with future conflicts. But one thing I have noticed that a lot of channel partner managers do is the suck it and see approach. So we'll see how we get on with them and might sign a contract with them after a year and see how it goes. I'd suggest get something in place, even if it's a very simple agreement, but get something in place, because if something goes wrong, then there is an agreement in place. By law, there is an agreement in place. It's just that you don't know what it is, and it's likely to be in their country as well. So get some kind of a contract together, some kind of an agreement. It helps to manage the expectations, and it protects both you and the channel partner. So did I answer that?
Yes, yes, absolutely. It's more, it'd be overwhelming to write one. You know, is there a template or is there things to definitely include, Rory?
Well, just going to touch on something Sharon said there. I think if people do want to take a gently approach and it's small business and so on, minimally, even if they say we're just going to leave it for 12 months, a heads of agreement, just some simple terms. It's that old sort of good fences make good neighbors. Some of the worst things that I've seen happen are genuine misunderstandings where people don't remember what was discussed at some big trade show when they first met. And somebody said, oh, I thought you were going to do this. And no, I thought you were going to do. If it's written down, even if it's just a few bullet points, what the expectations in both directions are, If I was a distributor, and I have been, but I've also been a manufacturer, I think most manufacturers quite often put all the obligations on a distributor, but they forget to commit to anything themselves within the agreement. And I think it's really important to say, what are we going to do to help you succeed? We're not just going to get you to sign this piece of paper and abandon you and then come back in 12 months and say, hey, why haven't you sold $1 million worth of X or Y or Z? So whether it's formal training, remote, or if it's complex sensing, or certifying a technician, if there's going to be support, whatever it might be, help at 2 trade shows in the next 12 months, some reasonable. The other thing that I've seen that can create problems is people putting in targets without thinking about the local market. So a good example, I think many of the people here are familiar with selling to university scientists as well as industry. When I sell to industry, things can happen reasonably quickly if someone has budget available. I know if there's a high value capital piece of equipment, I'll make first contact with a customer, maybe show them there's something new, and then they're going to scratch their heads for a little while, get their heads around it. Maybe we demo the product. Maybe after a number of months, they decide they want to buy it. But of course, once they decide they want to buy it, the next step in science, at the bench in research, in universities, they have to apply for money. So you can add minimally 6 months, 8 months onto that. Then it will have to go, so 12 months is a very short period of time. So if I was dealing with or advising a manufacturer who is selling predominantly into the university sector, I would say be very cautious and realistic about what your expectations are over the first period of time. Because if you start beating your new distributor for not selling your high capital value equipment within the first 6 months, and that isn't even one grant cycle, you haven't given them a reasonable chance. So I think a little bit of thinking, both sides need to think about the other side's perspective and try and work out what, if it's going to be a long relationship, what's fair and reasonable for both sides. And hopefully then, if it's well written, from there on, what's good for one is good for both. So I would say targets from year 2, actually, if you're talking about that kind of equipment, is probably something I would do.
Well, you could even set customer visit targets or sales funnel generation targets in the beginning rather than final sale targets. So you can go for other kinds of activities that you would expect from them rather than the sale. And setting when you do eventually set the target, don't put it on them. Work with them to find out what is reasonable and get agreement on that, because then you might set them a target and they don't agree with it, but they don't feel that they can do anything about it. So make sure that you both really believe that the target is achievable. And if they don't believe it is, then you can tell them the things that you're going to do for them and with them to help them to get there. Yeah, there's other kinds of things rather than sales targets that you can put on them to help them along their way, especially initially.
So as part of our distributor agreement, we do a sales and marketing plan. So that's actually part of the contract, and we will, in the first 12 months, we will say, okay, we're going to do this many customer visits with you, we're going to do this many conferences, we want to maybe do this particular e-shot campaign on a particular subject, and so this will all be planned out in the 12 months. So we do that as part of the contract, in agreement, obviously, and discuss with the distributor. And I agree, Sharon, about target setting to make sure that it is realistic and discussed with both parties. That's something that's really important, that it's in agreement with both, so that we're both happy moving forward. So that's how we would work with the contract and ensure that we have activities, as you say, from both sides, activities that we have to do, training that we have to do, support that we have to do, but also things that they are signed up to as well.
And they might not believe the target that you suggest for them. So you could maybe provide evidence from the sales that you're getting in other countries that are similar. You know, in this country, it's a very similar country to yours. They've achieved these sales. So there's absolutely no reason why you can't in your country achieve that, because they might not believe it initially. You just sort of set an agreement with them and say, right, well, we're going to try. I know that you can do it. We'll just develop a plan and you'll see. And then you'll trust me when I say the next thing.
And one of the questions coming through is, sorry, Rory, go on ahead. I just have a load of questions, so I'm trying to.
Well, that's fine. Well, very quick one. I think it's good if distribution agreements discuss and set out some reasonable guidelines for how to handle discounting situations. You know, you could say the distributor handles discounts. If it's going to be more than that, it's got to be agreed with the manufacturer, particularly with high value capital equipment. And maybe there's some formula so that you share the pain or the gain, so to speak, so that each isn't a case by case, doesn't end up causing friction. That's just a thought.
That was one of the questions, whether you can force them to do it at a certain price point, or like legally, can you force them to sell it, or do you have to just sort of guide them and hope that they do?
Again, I'm not a lawyer, but I have a feeling that you're not allowed to tell them what the end user price should be.
And I come in on that. I do. My understanding from the lawyers we've dealt with, because we've quite complex contracts, is you can exchange exclusivity for a level of price control and for a level of third-party borrowing. So we talked about that. There's third-party forcing and borrowing are the two big, ever since Sarbanes-Oxley, the two big legal problems with distributors. And normally you're not allowed to bar or force someone to do business with someone else. But if there is, you can trade it contractually if you're giving the distributor a benefit. So if you give them exclusivity, you can say, well, in return for that, this happens with perfume and fancy goods, you know, designer goods all the time. The master distributors in Europe or America are required to maintain the price and not flood the market with a cheap product or discount too much, because the brand, I don't know, Gucci or whatever it is, wants to. So that is allowed, but not in non-exclusive situations. And you have to be very careful about, you know, it has to be seen as a reasonable trade.
Oh, good advice.
Another one is really what sort of discount do you do? So you mentioned there about maybe meeting them in the middle whenever you're discounting to an end user, but what sort of discount or deal would you give the distributors typically? And what, you know, obviously it will depend on the price of the product, but how would you weigh that up?
I did a wee survey a few years ago, and I got about 100 or something, like 113 or something, manufacturers of consumables and high-end products to tell us what kind of a discount distributors would typically get, and it varied depending on the product type, but 35%, something like that on average. Is that what you would agree? Would you agree that that's about the rough ballpark? I can call it mine.
That's exactly what I do in my manufacturing. I have two manufacturing businesses as well as our RedBox business. I have three actually, but I own part of another one then in California. So, and they all are in the 35 sort of range. Some have some slightly special. And when I was with my previous companies, that was very standard. Some Japanese companies will often do 40. Some of the Chinese companies will even go to 50, but 35 is reasonable. I think people often have unrealistic expectations. They'll say, here's our fantastic product. We'd like you to buy a demo system. We'd then like you to go out and visit customers, fly around the world promoting it for us. And we're going to give you the princely sum of 12%. And we'd like you to take on the currency risk, and we'd like you to take on the credit risk with the end users, you know. So I think you also have to, in that, look at the product. I think I've also seen for low value repeat order products, sort of consumables, where you might put a bit of work in to get the first one in, but then you're going to have what a friend of mine from the UK used to call a drip and roast, that you can keep taking from. Then you could argue for a lowered, or maybe you could be really clever and give people a high margin on first acquisition of a customer, and then a more kind of farming, but that would only work for certain categories of products. But 35, Sharon, is exactly what I've seen all over the place as the standard number.
I would say though, think about the channel partner and what they're doing for you. So it could be you could say, right, okay, if you're doing demos, if you're doing this, if you're doing that, the basic discount is 30%. But if you do servicing, if you do this, if you do, then it goes up. So you can add a few extra percent on if they're going to do extra things, because you don't want to give 35% to one distributor who just sits and does nothing and another one who's super proactive. You might want to reward them by giving them a little bit more. So you could have your standard discount for channel partners at one level, and then give them something to aim for to achieve that extra. It can be motivational for them. Give them extra if they're doing extra work for you.
I worked with a company, Judy, you mentioned having a marketing plan in your contracts. And I worked with a company some years back, and they had if you execute on this many promotional activities by the end of year one, you will get an extra percentage discount. And I thought that was tied in very well with sort of accepting that there was a need for early investment for long-term sales, and they accepted that. So they hung out a little carrot on the end of the stick. Which I thought, can be a clever idea. Certain categories of products can work very well.
That's actually one of the questions. Are there any further incentives you can give people, incentive models to be given if they reach their goals? Judy, do you have that, or do you do that sort of extra percentage thing that Rory's talking about?
I suppose not so much extra percentage. I guess multiple products would be sold, then we'd look at extra discount. What we tend to do is what we like to do is actually in our distributor conference, which we'll do yearly, we'll have our awards, and we feel that's, I mean, the distributors absolutely love that, and they absolutely love being recognized in front of their peer group, the other distributors, and also in front of the company. So we tend to do that. We do that every year in our distributor conference, and it works really well. And we actually have a range of awards, not just for those people that have sold the most. They could be doing something from something unusual, let's say new web marketing or whatever, or they could be really good customer service or whatever. So we tend to have a different levels of awards, and we find that works really well to motivate the distributors.
And they're so proud of that when they get an award. They have it all over their website. They have it in their office. They read things when you go into their office and everything. They're so proud. It's a very, very motivational thing to do. Don't underestimate it.
That would make sense though, because we said about doing your due diligence when you're looking for a new rep. Go on to LinkedIn, and if you see that they've just won an award from one of their manufacturers and say they're fantastic, I mean, of course, that's going to inspire you to, sign them up. So of course that would help them as well. So that's a great example of one.
Yeah, and they can get like a badge for being a premium, super duper fantastic channel partner in the eyes of the manufacturer. They love having these. It's good for their company too. It's a win-win in the eyes of their customers, because they can see that too.
Does anyone have any experience of, rather than using a distributor, but using them as a finder's fee that they would then, pay them, but then they pass it back to you? Or do you think it is better just to go all like full hog in for them to do the whole thing?
You find they do that a lot in the US and around Asia, but in Europe you don't see it so much. And I think, well, this is hearsay, but I believe that the laws in Europe make it very difficult to, if you've got an agent, if you've got an agent where the customer pays you and you give the agent a commission. That's kind of the difference. It's quite difficult to get rid of them if they're no good, and it's quite expensive to get out of that relationship. In Europe, it doesn't seem to be anywhere else in the world. And this is I've just heard this from a few different people. I don't know if this is true. What have you heard anything like that? It just doesn't seem to be that.
I have in India, but actually you raise an interesting point. You're correct. Under European law, if a distributor, and it comes back to what should be in a distributor agreement, if there isn't a good exit in a distributor agreement, a good way out for cause or for whatever, then you can find that the agent in Europe has acquired rights under European law and you can't actually get rid of them. And just saying, hey, putting in a contract, we can give you 30 days notice or something, doesn't cut it. That doesn't, the courts don't support that. So you have to decide on some reasonable and realistic reasons why a contract should end, and you have to put those cases in and how they'll be handled and so on. But coming back to the other thing, no, I agree, Sharon, not in Europe, never seen that done. Have seen it done in India quite regularly, and it's done there partially because of all of the graft, all of the people looking for backhanders. So you'll actually get a fairly honest agent who'll set up a deal, and then the university will buy, or the end user, the pharma company will buy directly from the manufacturer via a letter of credit. Because it's much harder for people to sort of try and get in and try and ask for backhanders directly with a European or American company. Well, it's illegal for the directors of the companies now. There was a time about 20 years ago when in the UK you could actually put bribes on a corporate tax return, but that's long since gone.
Yeah, you got to be very careful with these things.
And one person said, I mean, like, there's a balance. So there you're terminating the agreement. Maybe they didn't meet the expectations that you'd set in the agreement and you'd done it well, so you can do so. Or on the other side, the distributor is just killing it. It's amazing. And then the bosses are saying, why aren't you guys in there? If it's that easy, why are we not in there? You know, do you want then the distributor to just be okay? Because if they go to any of those ends, they get their contract terminated?
That's one of the distributor's greatest fears. If they're too good, you'll take it off them. So again, manage the expectations. So manage that trust and get something into the agreement about the exit, as Rory understands very well, is how are you going to exit from the channel partner and move to a direct sales office? And it's all about being honest and open about what the process is going to be. But Rory, that's your bag.
Yeah, in our contract, we confront that one straight head on, and we say to our clients, because we're running their office in Europe, at a certain point, if it's successful, it would make sense for them to open up their own wholly owned office. And so we have an exit structure, an exit fee based on success over a baseline. And in return for that, we agree to hand over all the customer information, even the phone lines, everything goes over. And we have a whole process for that. And in fact, because we've hired salespeople for them, if they want to move over to the new organization, we won't stand in their way either. So we want divorce is the wrong word. We want to see it as a kind of a happy separation. After it's done, it's reasonable course, and that's really important. But I think that can be done in ordinary distributor agreements. I think I've seen cases where distributors have been given, who've been performing really well, have been given 30 days notice or 60 days notice, and it is very unfair. And it doesn't allow, and I know of one many years ago where, and of course most distributors won't do this, where they became very dependent on a single manufacturer because they were being so successful. And almost overnight, the company was purchased and they had everything pulled from them, and the business was in real trouble. And so that's a legitimate fear. And I think it's not unreasonable to give it some cover in a distribution agreement.
How do you guys handle that, Judith?
Obviously within the contract, if there's different contracts for different distributors and whatever, and obviously what's negotiated, there is obviously an exit strategy for both ourselves and the distributor. But I agree, it is a fear of the distributor, you know, that it's going to be taken off them. But you know, I think, as you say, we just have to have it in the contract. It has to be clear to both sides. But I mean, it is all about trust. So that's, I think, the most important thing, that trust is and honesty is there between the distributor and the manufacturer from the start, and everyone's open and honest about what's happening and how we're going forward. So that's what we try to do. We try to build the trust as quickly and as best as possible. And that can mean a lot of visits out to the territory. And I think that's the best way really to gain the trust, out for dinners, out chatting about other things other than the business, so that they actually get to know you and they do trust you. And then obviously these things can happen, but you know, as long as everyone's clear about what's happening, then that's the only way forward.
Someone's asking here, partners, distributors, dealers, any difference, or are we just, people just use different terms for the same thing?
A distributor will buy the product from the manufacturer and then mark it up and sell it to the customer. A dealer would find the customer, but the customer buys from the manufacturer, and then the dealer gets their
that's your finder fee.
Manufacturer. So it's the way the money goes, really, my understanding.
There are some others, so there are value-added resellers. So you may get somebody who's got a product or got a specialized customer base. So we handle distribution for our clients in Europe as well. So we'll do some selling direct. We have a particular client where the product has a use in veterinary, and we work through local veterinary suppliers for that particular market segment, whilst we might sell direct into those countries to the pharma or university academic sector.
Like subletting it almost, the distributor becomes its mini distributor.
Yeah, and well, they have some value they add by doing something specialized that maybe we don't have, and so there are different types of this. There are subtle differences between distributors.
Yeah, that's why I started calling channel partners, because there's too many different flavors.
Yeah,
that covers you. So the main question that's coming through time and time again, and conscious of time here, so we should get it answered, is just for each of you, like, what are your key things if you are a channel partner manager from each of your perspectives? What are the things that you should be doing just on an ongoing basis to make sure that that particular distributor is doing the work for you rather than any of their other portfolios? We'll just, Sharon, if you want to kick off.
Communication, keep touching base with them to see how they're doing. It's quite tempting to spend all your time with the noisy, low value distributors who suck up all of your time. But make sure that the best distributors that you've got are getting your attention as well, because helping them out a little bit can bring in a lot more than spending your time on little ones. So it's being really, really focused on where you spend your time and communicating with your channel partners effectively, and communicate with them in the right way, depending on the message that it is that you want to get across. I could talk about that all day, but anyway, communication.
I would add to that, make a plan to support. Don't just react to questions from your distributors. Your communication is key. Make a plan to support. I think visit them. I think people often appoint distributors and then abandon them, and they think, oh, well, that's that market. That's the UK taken care of now. We've got somebody. It's up on the website. If you go and visit them regularly and ask to have time, maybe one of the great things you can do, and I've done successfully when I was a distributor manager many years ago, is if you've got distributors with a lot of salespeople, they often have internal sales meetings. So we would try and get to visit them when they were having their quarterly sales meeting and do a presentation to their whole team, and try and get the frontline people excited. And we'd often see a little bump in sales in the following sort of 6 months. And I think that kind of thing can become if it's part of your regular process. So if you make supporting distributors a proactive challenge for yourself.
Be proactive rather than reactive. That's, yeah.
Yeah, I think for me, obviously, that's my work day in, day out. So my main thing is to be in their inbox or be on the phone to them as regularly as possible so they don't forget about me. They've got other manufacturers that they've got to sell, so I need to be in their mind. I don't want them to forget about me. So that's my main thing. I'll have regular calls with them as well as emails, and we'll set that up normally every couple of weeks. Again, I agree, Rory, you got to be out visiting them as much as possible and supporting. We will set up training, a lot of training for the distributors, so we don't forget if we have a new product, as well as our internal salespeople. We need to train our distributors as well. So that's really important. And again, the benefit of having a distributor conference as well, and bringing all the distributors together. They can hear the stories from the other distributors, success stories. At the end of the day, they want to make money. They want to make money out of selling your product. So you got to make it as easy for them as possible to be able to sell your product and therefore make money for their business.
Perfect. Well, that was really interesting. Thankfully, we recorded it for anyone that wants to go back, and we'll also summarize it in a blog, of course, because there was a lot there, a lot of tips. In terms of, we mentioned a lot about finding distributors. In terms of looking for your competitors or complementary ones, if you go on the website of most of the manufacturers, they will have a section on the top that says partners, dealers. You'll be able to look through all of those, and that's a great place to find them. Of course, you can go to Sharon, who will be able to help you, or Rory, if he'll be able to help you as well, potentially. And if you have any other questions as well, any of the guys, Judy, you can get her on LinkedIn, and I'll share their details as well after this. Thank you very much, everyone. And thanks everyone for joining us. We'll get we email out with the details of the recording, and see you all for the next one. Remember to get your SAMPS award submission in before next Friday. Thanks. Bye.